It's a great and humbling privilege for me to present in front of such an esteemed group. As mentioned, my name is Mendy Levin. I'm the principal at Cheder Chabad of Philadelphia. And while I don't have an extensive academic background, I have studied the Rebbe, Lubavitcher Rebbe's teachings relating to education, but perhaps more importantly, I'm in the trenches of Hasidic education, trying to apply them in actuality. So I'm going to attempt to present what I have seen and taken, or the paradigm that I have developed from studying the Rebbe's teachings, and 3 or 4, time permitting, applications thereof. Just bouncing off from the heated discussion in the last session, Phil and I had a discussion, or a few discussions, in my office at the Cheder. And one thing I mentioned to him that I'm interested in doing, and I'm putting it out there if anyone wants to join me in the venture, I would be very interested, is in studying the works of the Rebbe and to identify if there is a novelty in relationship to previous Jewish thought, and if there is, what it is. What I'm going to present is nonetheless a paradigm that I have developed, and I believe that the Rebbe developed insofar as education is concerned, and a pattern, a way of looking at it. So you meant to say something a little provocative when you start speaking. So it might be fair to say that according to the Rebbe, education in schools is not really about academia, knowledge, perhaps also not about learning a trade and being able to make it out there in the world. Those are important components of education, but they do not exemplify the essence of education according to what I have learned in the Rebbe's teachings. And perhaps according to the Rebbe takes a more holistic approach to education where we're trying to nurture the identity of a child, starting with his core beliefs, his moral compass, and all the way through to his daily behavior and actions. And this is expressed not only while the child is at school, but from the moment the child is born and through his schooling. The Rebbe speaks about even during his schooling while he's outside the classroom and at home or wherever he might be, and into the years, and especially into the years outside of school, and thereby influencing society at large. So a couple of the applications thereof, I thought of 4. There are many more, and you could frame it however you'd like. The 4 that I would like to discuss briefly are A, the role of the educator, B, the core of the education, or perhaps the order of the education, C, the environment of the student, and D, the details, the importance of the details. So I'll start with the role of the educator. I know I'm treading territory that's been discussed a little before, just to be brief, and how the idea that I presented before is seen through those lenses, the role of the educator. The Rebbe quotes in his book Hayom Yom from a story from the first Chabad Rebbe, who was looking to find a teacher for his son, who later became a Rebbe in his own right. And he found an esteemed student of the Maggid who he wanted to hire. And he told him that the two of us have distinct mitzvot. I, as a father, have the mitzvah of educating my child. You have the mitzvah and the obligation to support and sustain your family. What I'd like to do is to make a switch. I would like to give you my responsibility, my mitzvah, of educating my child, and I would like to take your responsibility of sustaining your family by paying you for the work. The Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, continued and told him as follows: now, you're going to be teaching my son. What do I want you to teach him? Well, education starts with the Jewish alphabet, Aleph Bet. What is an Aleph? An Aleph, said the Alter Rebbe, is a dot on the top, or a yud on the top, a dot on the bottom, and a line in between. The dot on the top represents Hashem, God. The dot on the bottom represents the student, my son, or whoever the student might be. And then the role of the educator is that line, the line of of belief in God, of Yirat Shamayim, of creating the connection between God and the human being down here. I think that story tells us quite a bit about the role of the educator, and maybe taking it a little bit out of its literal meaning and based on other Jewish and Chabad texts, or not just Chabad texts, that what the Alter Rebbe was perhaps saying is that an educator, in essence, replaces the father. It's not just someone who you drop off in the classroom and provides information, knowledge, and all. It's much more than that. Just like a father or mother, father figure, is responsible for the child's attitudes, the way the child deals with challenges, the way the child deals with friends and society. So it's the role of the educator to replace that, or to be an extension of that, and that's essentially perhaps what the Alter Rebbe was telling the Malamed, the teacher. Another example of this is in many letters of the Rebbe, where he discusses choosing a teacher. The very first quality the Rebbe says to look for is not his knowledge of the course material, it's the character and personality of the teacher. In the context of Hasidic education, that would mean a Chassid. But I believe that the idea is relevant beyond that, someone who is a good role model for the student and can teach the student beyond the academics that the student is learning. The second idea, the second implementation, is the order of education, or perhaps the core of education. I was reading a talk of the Rebbe from the year 1955, where the Rebbe was kind of complaining about what some teachers in cheters, in Talmud Torahs, in yeshivas, in Jewish educational institutions, what they were doing. And a lot of teachers were busy giving pilpul. Pilpul is basically complex discussion and debate on perhaps a Rambam, a text from Maimonides, or on a Talmud. And the Rebbe said that perhaps these teachers are missing and are out of touch with two very important prerequisites. The first one is the core beliefs, the values of the student. And the second one is the behaviors of the student. The core beliefs, first and foremost, a teacher should be teaching the student, using the words of the Rebbe, tzedek v'yosher, righteousness, integrity, and according to the Rebbe, the belief in God, which would guarantee, hopefully, the implementation thereof. And then the fulfillment of mitzvahs, or in the case of humanity, behaving based on those values. Once you've done that, the Rebbe said to the Rosh Yeshivas and to the teachers, then you have a bucket that you could fill. Then you could start putting in knowledge. Then you could start teaching information. But until you do that, you don't have a person to teach. I heard last year a story of an educator or a teacher in Detroit who went to the Rebbe for a meeting, a Yechidus, and the Rebbe asked him, do you tell your students stories? And the man was a religious man. He said, no, it takes away from the time of studying Torah. It's bittul Torah. And the Rebbe was very agitated by his response, and the Rebbe kind of got up and said, what? And he said that the real learning happens when you have stories, when you have actual implementation of these core values that we're trying to teach the children. The third element I mentioned was the environment that the student is in. There's an ancient Jewish custom that when a baby is born, the mother will put on the doorway to the house, and sometimes in the crib, a small paper with the Shir HaMa'alot on it. And according to Kabbalah sources, it protects the mom and baby from any kind of damage that might happen. Shir HaMa'alot is a psalm in Tehillim, it's a psalm, and the words over there have a mystical meaning which could protect the child and the mother from any danger. But the Rebbe takes that a step further, and the Rebbe says that perhaps there's an additional benefit of having that little card in the stroller with a baby, which is that from the first moment a child is born, what are we going to surround him or her with? And the Rebbe believed that we should be surrounding the child with holiness and the values that we want to instill the child with. Obviously, if we want to apply these ideas beyond, and I'm in the Chabad educational system, I believe that they can be applied beyond with other meanings. But the Rebbe gave a few other examples. The lullabies we sing to children, they could either be silly songs about monkeys jumping on beds or rabbits that get colds and stuff like that, or we could be singing to children songs about the values we want to instill in them. You know, my grandmother grew up in communist Russia, and her father sang to her an illegal song about being strong in her Judaism, and people apparently were, according to my grandmother, were arrested for singing that song. But that the songs we sing to a child should carry that message. The Rebbe wanted that children should have in their bedrooms books, and books as well as a tzedakah box, a charity box, in their bedrooms. And perhaps the most extreme example of this, although I do believe that the application is very broad, is that the Rebbe spoke about the pictures that the child has up in his room or the toys he's playing with should depict the values that you want to teach your child. In modern society, the Hollywood presents all kinds of characters for children to look up to, and perhaps we want that the characters that children look up to should be characters with positive messages and values. The extreme of that is, and many Chabad homes do this, that we won't put up pictures of non-kosher animals. We will only put up kosher animals or toys with kosher animals. And I believe that that's symbolic of something a lot greater, of the environment that you're trying to create for the child. And well, just to wrap up very briefly, the fourth one, maybe in the break-off we could talk about, just very, very, very briefly to wrap up. I read once that someone wrote to the Rebbe, came up with 10 rules of chinuch, of education. And the Rebbe made a little squiggle on it, a little note on it, and he said, the 11th rule is that there are no rules. And kind of saying that, but the Rebbe did not say that's the first rule, that's the 11th rule. There are rules, but on top of all that, there are no rules. And my interest is to explore how we could take some of these ideas beyond the four walls of the Chabad Cheder and perhaps find the meaning that it could have and the contribution it could have to society at large. And also, within the Chabad world, how we could take it from ideas and bring it to a more practical reality. Thank you very much.